All right. Okay. So today we'll be going over the task. In this task, the language flagged is Python. And there is no previous conversation history in this situation. So there is no context. Of course, if there was previous conversation history, you have to read it, get the context. It may not necessarily be applicable, and you're not grading based on the previous conversation history, but it's very important to read the previous conversation history for context to know what is fully expected of the model. Um, in this case, there's just a final prompt, and it says get 5.9 daily report using API in Python. Um, I'm guessing 5.9 is like a site or something. Okay, so of course, the first layer of any task will be the task flagging layer, where you go over a few questions, making sure that the task is safe to be moved over to the layer where you review the model responses. So, first question, any personally identifiable information is present in the prompt. In this case, there isn't, but if there were things such as SSNs, ID number, passport numbers, ID numbers, first names, last names, etc., emails, those are all considered personally identifiable information. So make sure to look out for that in tasks. Also make sure to look in the previous conversation history in case those things are present there, because in that case, you should still flag the task if it's present in the previous conversation history, because it's personally identifiable information. A substantially non-English task, so is maybe if there's just one or two words in another language, that is fine. Um, but by and large, the task should be in English. So yeah, they gave an example here. Can you speak French, mon ami? Just having mon ami there, it's not a big deal. That's a valid task. But if it was entirely in French, then it's not. Um, So any tasks asking about the assistant's identity, license, usage, characteristics, um, just asking about the getting more information about the model's limitations and what the model is, what the model is capable of doing, those sorts of things should be flagged. This doesn't include something like, oh, can you code in Python or can you speak Chinese? That's not what we mean by the model's capabilities, but um, just maybe like the specifications of the model. Those are things that you should flag in those situations. Um, of course, if the prompt requires a response longer than 2,000 words, that should be flagged as well. If the task requires information after July 2024, so maybe it's asking something like who won the 2024 Paris Olympics or something. Yeah, that's the exact example they gave. Then, yeah, you should flag that. Anything that requires information of after 2024 or is likely to. Sometimes it's not going to be as obvious as this example here. Sometimes it's just asking for the most up-to-date version of something which happened after July 2024. So be wary of those tasks. The task is beyond the model's capability, of course. So yeah, accessing the internet, interacting with files or software, changing models, sampling parameters, um, having knowledge of the current date, generating or analyzing images. Uh, task requesting advice in high risk areas. So yeah, this is a good one. I know that a lot of people have questions about tasks that ask for medical advice or ask for tools to help in like trading or in the stock market, that sorts of thing. As a general rule of thumb, yeah, you should flag those tasks. Of course, some may seem more harmful or illegal than others, but in general, they are high risk. So yeah, you should flag them. If it's asking something like, what is the name of this disease or whatever, then yeah, that is fine. That something objective that isn't really medical advice, then yeah, that doesn't need to be flagged. But anything like, oh, I have a bruised elbow, what do I do? Or develop a tool that can help me trade in the stock market or something like that. Yeah, just flag all of those sorts of tasks. Information that may be copyrighted includes requests for unsafe content. That's pretty self-explanatory. And the task requires a different programming language than the one specified. So if the task, sorry, um, yeah, if the task requires something like Python, but if it, yeah, but it's tagged as C++ or something like that, then you should flag that. Um, and yeah, are you ready to submit this task? You select yes, and then you moved over to the next layer. Um, we'll take questions after. Uh, I do know that one question that comes from the programming language one is, oh, what if the task requires no programming language, but a program, yeah, it requires no programming language, but Python was specified or something. I think in this case, if it requires, if Python is still tagged and it really requires no programming language, that is fine. I think what's more important is that another programming language was actually required, and that programming language wasn't tagged, and instead Python or something else was tagged. So in those cases, those ones you can, yeah, you can allow those tasks through. Okay. Um, so read the response and respond to the questions on the right. Of course, you're gonna see these in two different layers. So the person who flagged the task isn't gonna be the person who is answering the response. So when you're on this layer, you read the response. Of course, if you're not proficient in Python or you feel like it's a task that you are not capable of answering, then please skip those tasks. Everyone has an unlimited number of skips. So please, yeah, just skip any task that you're not capable of doing. All right. Um, Response A, here is a Python script that uses the 5.9 API to get the data report. Import requests, import JSON, username, your username, password, your password, set the URL for the daily report API endpoint, set the headers, okay, params, response equals to response.get URL headers, if response.status code is equal to 200, print data, print error plus response text. So obviously, this code is not testable because you require a username and password for 5.9 API to be able to test it. I think in this case, yeah, what you can do, just make sure it, I mean, yeah, it does look syntactically correct. Maybe you can, because it's code, you don't have to, yeah, because it's code, you don't have to put it in the fact check, but what you should do is maybe just double check that this is how you use the 5.9 API. Should be pretty straightforward. It seems right, but yeah, just double check that and verify that, since this isn't really testable code. Of course, if this was testable code, you have to always run your code so that you can catch runtime errors. Just eyeballing code is most likely going to make you miss a couple things. So please try to test code as much as possible and as thoroughly as possible. So yeah, this script uses the request library to make an API request to the 5.9 data report endpoint. It sets the API credentials, URL, headers, and parameters, and then makes the request. If the request is successful, if anyone has any questions about the task, could you please type it, and then I can answer it if it's something that's applicable in the middle of the presentation. Otherwise, we'll wait till after. So yes, as I was saying, the script uses request library to make an API request to the 5.9 data report endpoint. It sets the API credentials, URL, headers, and parameters, and then makes a request. If the request is successful, status code 200, the script passes the JSON response and prints the data report data. If the request fails, the script prints an error message. All right, so someone said about testing the code. When we find errors, where do we penalize the task? None of the mentions seem to have anything about wrong code. Yeah, so we're just right there. You penalize it on correctness. Correctness/completeness is where you penalize code, and what you should select is contains incorrect information. So contains incorrect information is what faulty code is considered. About code, so if a code is functionally correct but still missing an import statement or has a minor syntax error, you still can't give it a 5 on correctness. You still have to deduct points. You have to give it a 4 at best. If it's something very minor like a missing import statement, if the code is just logically flawed, does not work, it should be getting a 2 on correctness. So yeah, you should only be giving code that is flawless a 5 out of 5 on correctness/completeness. The correctness/completeness parameter also takes into account, yeah, did it fully answer everything that was requested in the prompt? So a prompt that, so code that is completely correct but doesn't completely answer the prompt is also not going to get a perfect score on this parameter. It may get a 3 or a 4. See minor hallucinations, omissions, that sort of thing, because you are checking both correctness and completeness. So think of instruction following, correctness, that's all meshed into one dimension in this project. And then there are these checkboxes, contains incorrect information. So if the model said something that isn't true in the explanation, or if it has faulty code, that checkbox should be selected. Key information is missing, so key information to maybe understand or to complete the explanation is missing. You should select that checkbox. MISA is one or more specific prompt requirements. So if it did not completely follow the instructions in the sense that it may have omitted doing something. Contains unwarranted refusal. So the model refuses to answer the question when it should have. And the model response is outdated as of July 2024 is the last checkbox. Okay. Another thing, yeah, fact checking. Fact checking is very important. The format for fact checking is source and excerpt. Since there isn't really much to fact check here, since verifying the correctness of the code would be enough to fact check. I guess in this case, since the code isn't really testable, you can put the official documentation of the request to the library. But because it's kind of used in the code and the code working verifies that the library does what it's supposed to do, then yeah, it's okay to not fact check this. But in any situation where there is mention of a specific library capable of doing something, or any non-common information, it may be coding related or non-coding related, that has to be fact checked. Everyone has to be fact checked, and you have to follow the appropriate format. The appropriate format is source, and then you include the URL and then an excerpt, and the excerpt has to be from the source. So an excerpt from the source. Yeah, and the excerpt has to be from the source. So the excerpt, maybe in a situation, you're probably wondering a situation where the model claimed that there was a library capable of doing something, or a function in a library, but that function does not exist. How do you prove that with an excerpt? What you can do is that if there is a function that goes by a different name that does what the model is claiming this fake function does, you should just include that function as the excerpt. If there is no function that does that, it just doesn't exist in an extreme case, yeah, you should just write a brief sentence or two explaining that the so-called function or the so-called thing that the model stated does not exist. You should put that in for the excerpt in that situation. But in any other situation, the excerpt should be, yeah, an excerpt from the source. So since you contest the code, how should we rate it for correctness and helpfulness? Yeah, this one is complicated. I think in this rare instance, maybe it would be a good idea to actually fact check, because fact checking will help you know how you're supposed to make the API call. And since the code isn't really testable, I think a fact check should actually be appropriate in this situation. Because you would need to go to the official documentation of 5.9 to see examples of how to make these requests, and also the request library. You would need to check those to make sure that the code is doing the appropriate thing, because you still need to check the code to the best of your ability, and the best of your ability is looking at other examples from the official documentation to see if it works. So yeah, I think in normal situations where you're testing the code, you don't need to fact check the 5.9 or the requests because they're already used in the code, and testing the code would see if the one or two statements they made are true or not. But since that's not possible in this case, yeah, maybe just fact check those, and that's how you would verify correctness. You then look and see if it's syntactically correct. So you look very carefully, and that's the best way you can test non-testable code, I suppose. So yeah, this person said that there's key information missing and misses one or more specific prompt requirements. Get 5.9 data report using API in Python. Use the API URL headers, make the API request. So I guess one thing here, okay, so response is equals to request dot get URL. URL is daily report. Headers is equal to header, yeah, params is equal to, okay, so params is equal to start date 2022/01 2022. Why 2022 though? Uh, okay, so it seems like it's getting the data report for 2022, January, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and yeah, so yeah, that isn't considered incorrect information. But misses one or more specific prompt requirements would probably be the best option for that. Um, okay, so coherence, that's clarity. Um, as you can see, there are a lot of checkboxes here. So does it contain irrelevant information? No, it does not. Does it contain repetitions? No. Contradictions? No. Awkward phrasing or improper structure? No, it's well formatted. Such as Markdown or code, yeah. Does it contain style changes? Not really. Should it have addressed a false premise, mistake, or ambiguity in the prompt? The prompt was pretty clear, so it did not need to do that. It follows the prompt coding language, doesn't violate coding best practices, and it contains concise and relevant comments. So yeah, everything in terms of coherence as clarity is good. So that's why this is getting a 5 out of 5 on coherence as clarity. If it's getting anything less, you should probably select the appropriate checkbox just that states why you gave a lower score. Okay, simple slash complex language. So very important thing here. A lot of people because of the other dimensions may think that this one is one of those where a 1 is better than a 5, or it's a good thing to have more simple language or a good thing to have more complex language. No, it is not. It's just a dimension that you should evaluate. So a 1, very basic, a 5-year-old can understand it. A 3, so anything that contains a considerable amount of code should be at least a 3. Could be a 4 or a 5 depending on how complicated the domain is. A 5 is when it requires expert level knowledge to easily understand. So this could be code that is extremely sophisticated or or uses a lot of technical terminology. Or more likely, it could be a response or code that is related to a domain or subdomain of knowledge that requires an expert in the field to understand. So maybe if they're using machine learning in this particular healthcare topic or something that not the average person is going to understand or have enough knowledge in that field to be able to understand the code, even if they understand whatever machine learning algorithms are being used. So that's an example of a 5, for instance. And then a 2 or a 1, it uses little to no programming language, very easy to understand, and it doesn't use any sophisticated language in any other field or jargon. Okay, so in this case, they gave it a 3. I guess I can agree with that. Yeah, there's a 3. They didn't need nothing too complicated here. I think anyone can understand it with the explanation. Most complicated thing is, API, which isn't that. Yeah, so this is a 3. I can agree with that. Helpfulness overall. The helpfulness overall was given a 4, and the person said the response is mostly helpful. So yes, very important. In case you haven't checked out the instructions rubric or seen any of the announcements that I've made in the channels in the last week, we have updated the guidance on this. So if you're giving a 1, then the helpfulness opening statement should be the response is not helpful. if you're given a 2, it should start with the response is slightly helpful. If you're given a 3, the response is partially helpful. If it's a 4, the response is mostly helpful. And if it's a 5, the response is perfectly helpful. So in this case, they gave a 4. They said the response is mostly helpful as it provides valuable help in the form of a Python program that demonstrates how to use the API to get a data report from 5.9. It provides code and explains how to prepare the request, handle a response, and what to do if the request fires. However, the response lacks a base64 library import, which is essential for the code to work properly. This import should be added to make the response more accurate and comprehensive. I ran the code on my device using VS Code, so I guess this person was able to run the code. Maybe they created an account or something. You don't really have to create accounts on things to run code. If you already have an account, you can test it. However, so yeah, that is so yeah, that is what they stated. There is also that thing of getting the daily report from this time frame, which I don't know if that is, yeah, I wouldn't consider that correct, but it seems like this person missed out on that. Of course, they didn't specify a particular time, but it's unlikely that they wanted something so far back. All right. So first, you need to install this. This one gave a step-by-step. So they said first you need to install the requests library. If you haven't already, you can install this using pip install requests. Yeah, that needs a fact check. I suppose, well, actually, you can test that, so that doesn't need a fact check, because you can just try and install it using pip yourself, and if it works, then yeah, you don't need to fact check that. Next, you need to obtain your 5.9 API credentials, including the username, password, and base URL for your 5.9 instance. Find this information in the 5.9 admin portal. Here's a sample Python script to get you started. Okay, okay, so they did a fact check here. All right, import request, import JSON from datetime import. All right, get authentication token. This one, okay, they created a function for you to select the date. Okay. Place the script above will fetch data report for yesterday. You can modify the get data report function to accept a date. To get data report function, please note that the actual report date and structure may vary depending on your 5.9 configuration. You can refer to the 5.9 API documentation for more information on available report fields and filters. Okay. All right. So yeah, you select if there's something to fact check that. So yeah, of course, this is saying source and fact. That's outdated. This is an older task. That is why they have source and fact here. It should be source and excerpt. We're not penalizing old tasks for not using source and excerpt, but going forward, any new tasks, we expect you to use the appropriate format. So to authenticate with the 5.9 API, use the endpoint auth token to receive a token that will be used for subsequent requests. Show that your credentials are correct and the endpoint is correctly formatted. And from the official documentation. An important thing about fact checking that I forgot to bring up above is, please don't use forums for your fact checks. Don't use sites like Wikipedia. Don't use, or blogs. Don't use sites like Stack Overflow, Quora, Reddit. Those, anyone can put something up on there without it being verified. So please don't use those sites as a fact check. And another thing that I did forget to mention, please don't, thanks for the flag, Nicholas. That last sentence isn't good to have. I ran the code on my device using VS Code because you should never talk in first person. So make sure that you do not have any first person language in any of your justifications. Another thing is that you should not put the rating, so the number rating that you gave a response in your justification. So you shouldn't say, I gave this was given a 4 because, or I gave this a 4 because. You should just use the phrasing that we provided. So mostly helpful. If it's a 4, perfectly helpful. You should never say the number that you gave. That's not really beneficial to the model and can cause some confusion. All right, so here they selected 3 checkboxes. They said it contains incorrect information, key information missing. This is one or more specific prompt requirements. We'll check out their justification to see why they said that. This person's obviously tested the code. Coherence has clarity. It does seem clear and coherent. So that's why I was given a 5 out of 5. Simple/complex language. This can get a 3, 3 or 4. Succinct/verbose. I would say this is about intermediate length as well. Again, succinct/verbose, similarly to simple/complex language, a 1 is not better than a 5. Another thing that's really important to mention about succinct versus verbose is that verbosity does not mean redundancy. So a response can be very verbose and have no repetitions, no irrelevant information. It's all insightful. It's all detailed. It's just a very verbose, long response. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And then a 1 is succinct, meaning that you can't remove anything from that response without it impacting the completeness of the response. So it's just the bare minimum that is needed to satisfy the response is what you would give a 1. All right, helpfulness overall, they gave a helpfulness rating of a 3. So the response is partially helpful as it provides code to get a data report. To get a daily report from 5.9 using the API in Python. The code includes clear steps to request an authentication token and get the data report with an explanation of how to enter credentials and modify the report date. However, there was a problem with the code because it throws a 404 error when trying to get the token, including that the path/auth/token may be incorrect or has been changed. The response has not checked 5.9's documentation to confirm the validity of the points mentioned, so this makes the response partially helpful. A bit confused about this point here, but okay, so there's a problem with the code because it throws a 404 error when trying to get the token. So that should be incorrect information That's why that was selected and it's given partially helpful. Again, yeah, that I ran the code on my device using VS Code. Should not be mentioned, or it can just be said the code was tested locally, if you really feel the need to, but please don't use first person. Yeah, also, yeah, there's no point of saying it was tested on your device. What's important is that the code was tested. Okay. All right, so here is so response A was selected over response B in the preference ranking. Of course, considering the ratings that were given above, this can only be given, response one can only be said to be slightly better or better because there's a helpfulness difference of 1 between the two responses. So a helpfulness difference of 0 or 1 is going to make you give a slightly better rating. A helpfulness difference of 1 or 2 is going to give you a better rating, and a helpfulness difference of 2 and above is always going to be much better. That guidance is in the instructions, so make sure to follow it. Now, in the justification, your side-by-side justifications do not need to be as detailed as your helpfulness justification. So these should typically be about 10 to 50 words, whereas your helpfulness should always be above 50 words, 50 to 250 words. So in most cases, it should be significantly above 50 words. Yeah, you just need a brief justification on why you said one was better than the other. So remember to use the correct nomenclature. So at response space 1 is slightly better than at response space 2. Please don't write response and 1 as one word. That is wrong, and it's going to cause parsing issues when we're trying to get this data. That's why it's important for you to put the space, so use the correct standardized format. So at response 1 is slightly better than at response 2 because it provides the correct code, although it lacks the basic C4 library import, provides detailed information about how to prepare the request. Response 2 suffers from a token path issue and needs to be updated to meet the current 5.9 documentation. And then, yeah, neither response is valid. That is not true. So you select no. Neither response was valid. You would select yes. And as mentioned, maybe that's a good point, go over the task bank. So yeah, if neither response is if neither response is valid, then you should select that neither response is valid, and then afterwards, let me just load up the task bank. 1 second. Yeah, but basically you just say response 1 is as unhelpful as response 2. That should be the opening statement that you use when neither response is valid. It doesn't really you can choose which one you feel is slightly better than the other, because of course you do have to select one response being slightly better than the other, but in your justification you don't talk about one response being better than the other. You just make that selection, but what's important is that you're just saying that both of them are unhelpful. And yeah, briefly describe why both of them are unhelpful. That's what you do in situations where neither response is valid. All right. So yeah, Omar, you said the response will always be 404 because we don't have the authentication required. Well, it seems like since this person was able to run the first one, they do have the authentication required because they said that the first code worked. So I think we can believe them on that just for the sake of this just for the sake of this demonstration. All right, but thank you all. Let me stop recording.